very warm welcome to everybody who's here joining us to this episode of Views from the Field. We're very blessed today to have Sing to the Mountain founder and creator Mark Foreman joining us. So a warm welcome to Mark. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome, Allan, and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. It's our pleasure. And we're also joined on Zoom with our community of teachers on Zoom. So thank you all for joining us today. So Mark, in the way of an introduction, and we've known each other a while. I think it's been around 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, I'm not keeping track, but I think you're probably close to it. Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. So we're old friends, and the only thing that might make this session better for us if we were together in the same room with a pint or two.
Yes.
But
yes.
We'll do this from across an ocean and a continent. I'm going to introduce you in a way that doesn't fully encompass all of your work. But I have you as a self-identified police officer in recovery. So I hope we can circle back to that. And somewhere along the line, you got involved in mindfulness around the time we met or before then. And it's led you through your practice in psychotherapy that you've had to a more trauma-informed approach to your work and all that you do, and actually in life. And most recently, and this is where we'll begin in a moment, you've embraced photography and videography as mechanisms for bringing mindfulness, compassion, and love to help others restore connection into the world. So that's wonderful work, and that's, I imagine, what's led to Sing to the Mountain Studio as a vehicle to express that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just as you're describing my journey to me, I'm feeling this compassion and love and the connection welling up now. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, maybe you'd like to share a little bit of your photography so that we can all get a sense of how you're moving with that and bringing that out into the world right from the start. And then from there we can move forward and learn more.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. I took a few moments this morning to pull together 12 images that I've taken since January of this year. It's not a life history. It's not a slideshow. Invite everybody here and everybody watching to settle in and maybe ground and settle in. And when it's comfortable and feeling safe, to keep the eyes open and simply notice what's showing up as you see the images. I'm not going to talk a lot, describe them. I may do a little bit of guidance as we walk through them. Simply settling in, noticing color, shape, textures. Maybe noticing also if thoughts arrive. Or as the sight gazes at the colors and the shapes and the textures, the images, does awareness get pulled to a particular area? Simply noticing where attention is being drawn. Our thoughts coming in, emotions, sensations. Is anything changing in the body, in awareness? As the images move through awareness, is there a possibility of judging or letting go of judging, of simply accepting whatever shows up? Looking closer, drawing awareness to the first thing that enters awareness, and maybe exploring with a beginner's mind whatever else might be present in the image. Is there a desire for perfection, wanting the flower to be a certain way, or wanting something to be absent from the photo that might be present in the photo? As awareness settles on this image, the invitation is to bring to mind possibly the meaning of a sunflower. Simply recently came into my awareness that sunflower is a national flower of Ukraine. Each nodule within the center of the flower, within the disc, represents a whole flower of its own that will blossom when it's due and when it's ready. The invitation is to settle in and bring to mind the individuals that you may care about, that you may have heard about across the globe. And using my words or words of your own, with each out-breath, sending out love and compassion and kindness. With each in-breath, breathing in whatever needs to come into the body. May all beings experience joy and the roots of joy. May all beings experience happiness. May all beings be free from harm. May we all live with equanimity, balance, and peace. May we all live with equanimity, balance, and peace. May all beings find relief from pain and suffering and anguish. The invitation now is, when ready, invite movement into the body, maybe wiggling the fingers and the toes, taking a couple of breaths, and joining back into the meeting.
Beautiful images and beautiful sentiment. So where do you see yourself now within your photography?
It's an interesting question, and one that's actually been asked to me now a couple times this week from different directions, from different people in different stages of life and positions. And the answer doesn't keep me from cycling back to the police times. I'm not going back there per se, but an awareness that I've had is, now is where I'm meant to be. This is where I'm meant to be, what I'm meant to be doing. And I've been somehow, I've only gleaned this awareness just recently, that whether being a police officer, a therapist, a parent, a dad, a photographer, whatever it is, it's somehow I've been putting kindness out into the world, just in different ways. So there's a naturalness, a settling in, that as I take images and I share them out into the world, and I get something back from the people that are viewing them. Something's emerging. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to name it. I don't even try to name it, other than I'm just going with it. Simply taking more photos, gleaning a deeper awareness as to how I take a photo, what the photo represents afterwards, what shows up when I show it, what is a photo. We just looked at 12 images of whatever showed up with each one for anybody, and I'm trusting it. So my mindfulness practices along the way, many of what I've gotten from your teachings and other teachings, has provided me the foundation, I think, to capture these images and continue to explore something around them and do something with them.
Thank you. It's beautiful. Did this just show up all of a sudden, this photography as a vehicle, or is it something that has been part of your life?
Photography didn't just show up. I've been dabbling with it since the 1970s. Had an old parallax camera, way before even single lens reflex cameras were around, way back in the 70s, that I inherited from my dad. And most of the pictures I took were out of focus. When I look at them now, as a photo, they were really junk, yet the images still represent something. So along the way, I've had many cameras across my lifespan, but on April 17th last year, there was a very specific moment that launched me onto this path here. And I was out on a hike in Mission Trails Regional Park here in San Diego County. And it came across a couple women on the trail, and they had tripods and binoculars and telescopes and stuff with them. And they directed my attention to a cliff face that had a hawk nest. And in the hawk nest was a fledgling hawk. And that set me on the course that hasn't changed. I started watching the hawk. I went out every day, spent hundreds of hours with it, and the family. It was the entire family, the male and female adult hawk. And next thing I know, I'm taking pictures of birds and insects and plants and mammals. And there's a whole new world that opened up to me just from that encounter with the two women who were birders on the trail. And here we are.
Yeah. And here you are on the verge of almost becoming a park ranger at Mission Trails, the way I understand.
Well, that would entail having a job, and I don't want a job. I'm retired, but what I am doing is I've met many wonderful people along simply in the park, just showing up, other photographers, other people that have like interest in nature, many other people who are mindfulness-based type of individuals. And many of them would encourage me, hey, there's a volunteer program. You ought to volunteer. You're out here so often. Why don't you volunteer and be a trail guide? So I'm doing that. I'm in the midst of a trail guide class now. It's an intense class. I like to describe it as a master's level. It's 60 hours of training. The teachings are by botanists and biologists and geologists and learning all sorts of stuff. It's just a sampling of what it is that life's all about and how I'm connected to it all. And my understanding is probably how we are all connected to all of it, no matter how tiny or how large it is.
Yeah. How many days a week are you out on the trail?
It varies, but probably 4 or 5. If I haven't got out in a while, I'll just tell my wife I'm going for a walk. And she knows she may not see me for 2 hours. She may not see me for 4 or 5 hours. I just go out and I stay within the park, usually with my camera in my hand, wandering around, being with it, or whatever it is. Rarely do I go out with an intention to photograph anything specific.
How did you derive the name Sing to the Mountain Studios?
So the name of that, Sing to the Mountain Studio, is bubbled up and resonated with me for quite a while, even when I was still doing therapy as a psychotherapist. It started to formulate back around then. There's a particular singing group, Elephant Revival, who had a song named Sing to the Mountain. And the song itself is a story that's very reminiscent of what mindfulness practices are about. Somehow the concept of Sing to the Mountain started to resonate within me, that as a therapist, people would come to me, and if I were the mountain, they would be singing to me, which absolutely aligned with some of the practices, some that I've experienced you guiding a mountain meditation of being the mountain. Other mindfulness teachers may guide a similar meditation of being the mountain. So it started formulating all around that as, well, if I'm the mountain, or if I'm a mountain, what sings to me, whether it's nature, whether it was a client, or simply allowing myself to sing to myself and tell me stories. It's started to represent a lot. So that's it. It means a lot to me as I'm out in the park. For instance, there's small mountains. The tallest is about 12 or 1,300 feet tall. But I'll climb on top of a mountain once in a while and sit up there and simply be present with everything that comes around, literally being on the mountain, allowing myself to sit and be part of it and see what shows up.
So you have allowed us to sing to the mountain and have opened your studio to me, as volunteering your studio time and editing time, which I'm extremely grateful for, as our community is. As the mountain, what is your view of views from the field?
Getting this image popping up that coming from the peak of the mountain down across the slopes of many mountains, there are fields, there are meadows. They may be on the mountain, they may sit down in the valley below the mountain. all within sight of each other. Life moves through the field to get up to the mountain, or leaving the mountain top and going back down into a valley, going to go through a field, may pause and exist in the field. And this is all metaphorical, but I'm sensing it now as you're asking the question, that they're all transitional states of moving in and out of the field to the mountain and back. I don't know if there's anything deeper to that or higher to it.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
put some height to it. I don't know if there's anything higher to go with that other than your 40,000
Well, we could go to
feet.
the higher view of the field being the mindfulness field. And here we are, we're kind of creating this chronology of various teachers from within the field that's being posted on the Sing to the Mountain YouTube channel. So the higher view would be to ask, what is this? How does this fit in with mindful photography? Which direction is the channel going? What would you like to see? Just curious, because I don't know what this is. I'm very grateful for it. And, we're getting a lot of people able to express their view of the field. So I guess that's the higher view I'm looking for, is what is your view of what this is? And then we could talk about the field.
So this interaction here, this smaller collective of everybody here that we gather on Sunday mornings pretty regularly, has an emergence to it. I sense that there's a connectedness, and I can only imagine that after we part ways every Sunday and we go about into our individual directions of re-engaging, or a different engagement with life, that we carry something forward. Might have been a thought, an idea, with something that may have been discussed or may have got talked about, creates a little change in each and every one of us, and we move forward with it, in whether it shows up in the teachings out into the teacher community, or how we interact with people out in public or in our own communities or our families. I like to think that it's all the same thing. It's all that the idea of compassion and love and kindness is continuing to be talked about, discussed, experienced, engaged with, and then moved forward to the point that there's a watershed effect, that there's a growth to it. So much of what happens on a mountain, there's seasonal changes, things come and go, and everything that happens. Well, similarly, I'm here today talking with you one-on-one, with many. Many other guests have preceded me. Many will follow behind me, hopefully. And the emergence of what shows up is the mystery for me, that I continue to lean into the mystery, the beginner's mind of never done this one before, and watching what happens. And I don't have many intentions to grow the channel simply to get the views. It's more of if there's a need, the channel starts to grow, and it has. We're over 100 subscribers now, since you and I have kind of created this relationship of using Sing to the Mountain YouTube channel to support the mindful teacher community. More than doubled in subscribership, yet the subscribers come from many different directions. So there's something that's emerging now, which is the mystery to me, of there's a need other than the compassion, the beauty, the joy, the love and kindness. I'm not sure what else that need is. I try to stay true to that. And I've got the artistic side, and then I got the intellectual side that'll show up in being an editor and a producer of videos. But there's a lot that shows up all along the same thread of getting that thread of compassion, kindness, and love out into the world to make it just a little bit better. There is an intention there. It's to make the world a little bit better.
You once said to me that there was no worry of growing this so much that it would get you off the trail or take time away from your photography. And a lot of this emergence seems to me, from my perspective, like it could be grown. And I continue to find myself getting out of my own way from that also. So the emergent quality is interesting to me that you bring that up. And something else I know about you is you also teach systems theory at Allan University, right? Are you an adjunct professor, or what is?
Adjunct professor. It's Allan International University, San Diego campus.
Yeah.
And systems, I've taught a couple classrooms around systems theory, yet for a couple of decades now, I've been involved with several other efforts around trauma-informed systems. And then we can add on the word care if we go that far, trauma-informed systems of care, and what that means in psychology and community health and wellness and just general well-being for all of us. And so it informs everything, and it's present in everything that I do with Sing to the Mountain also. Is how do systems play with this?
Coming back around then to being a recovering police officer, systems theory, and where you are now with photography, how is this all integrating? And specifically, how's the recovery going?
Yeah.
Why aren't you recovered, Mark?
Yeah. Well, the term, I didn't make it up for myself as a descriptor. I was taking the Mindful Self-Compassion course, and one of the teachers in that course, I was going through a tough time. I was probably having my own dark night experiences during that particular course several years ago. I'd already been retired, hadn't been a police officer for several years, and one of the teachers, she's also a therapist in her other aspects of what she does, called me that. She goes, "It's like you're a police officer in recovery." And it resonated with me. Not to diminish the idea of being in recovery, as I've worked with individuals around addictions and helping them along their path in recovery, it's a process. There's not a destination with it. So with that it's a transition. It's me moving through transformation from doing the work of a police officer and everything that comes with that, which is steeped in leaning into other people's suffering and accumulating my own traumas and the roles that I may have played in implementing traumas against others and individuals, moving into more of a healing role of therapist or as mindfulness teacher or now as photographer, recognizing that there was a thread that ran through all of it. And even as a police officer, I'd show up as a police officer really because I cared about the community I was serving and trying to make the world a better place. But sometimes as a police officer, that shows up in a harsh way and would expose myself, my inner being, to things that maybe it wouldn't have experienced had I not had the job. And there's a learning that comes with that also, a deep learning. Trauma systems start to describe how when you get a collective of individuals who are traumatized, the organization functions like it's traumatized also. And so now with a long backward lens, I'm able to look, and with the education and the other experiences, I'm able to look across the landscape and see that sometimes police departments, fire departments, other first responders, other social work sometimes shows up meaning well, but because the trauma systems haven't been tended to in a compassionate way inwardly toward the individuals and toward the organization might show up in a harsh way, in a maladaptive way that may not be useful. It continues to circle back around to the idea of what's being called for now, compassionate.
So zooming out to a global perspective on that, you brought up Ukraine in the sunflower image. And there's traumatized systems within nations that when you really look deeply into the conflict that's going on now, go back centuries. And in a way, it seems to me almost really important in some way to educate oneself on that, to be able to begin to understand what's happening today. So what is your view on taking that traumatized system, which is happening now in this global scale, and bringing compassion to it and healing to it? And do you see any signs of that, any way of working with that for us as individuals?
If I start close to my own being, I have close friends, when I'm spatially close, people real close space-wise, people that I've worked with across my lifespan, but even a familial connection. My mom's ancestors come from the region of Ukraine. The trauma and the suffering doesn't let go simply because we move. So we can move across nations, across generations. If we don't do something individually to turn inward, and that turning inward frequently will bring in self-compassion, if we can open to it and heal what we carry with us so that we can make sense of it and pull it forward, then the wounds stay active. Might be across generations, could be across centuries, certainly at the national level. But what are nations made of? Every nation is made out of collectives of individuals, and it's the individuals that all have the individual suffering. The risk of rambling around this topic, I'm going to try not to, is, I guess back to my intention, is if I can authentically and honestly, as honest as I can, show up with a compassionate stance, and somebody is able to somehow sense that compassion from me, it will start to resonate within them, to soothe, to settle, to heal, so that then when they engage with the next person, it's a little bit different, a little bit kinder, a little bit more compassionate. There's certainly ways of engaging with fierce compassion and whatnot. I'm not suggesting that it's about not taking care of the individuals and the families and the communities, etc. It's more of, are we able to see the human on the other side? And something that I've been struck with for the last week and a half or 2 weeks on whatever news I've been able to see what's going on in Ukraine is the amount of compassion Ukraine is showing for the other side, while they're in the midst, as a collective, as a nation, trying to defend themselves and survive and take care of their own individuals and everything, and yet it's showing up around the world also. And when I talk to I know one individual who, in fact, I know of several, where one of their parents was born in Ukraine, one was born in Russia, and they're here. So it's like, okay, well, there are immediate direct connections here on nations. Well, what are nations? Nations are full of people, and it's like, no, the suffering's happening everywhere. We may have our own suffering present within some of us here. And this is where trauma systems come back in, is, well, yeah, we do, because this is part of the human experience, and what do we do with it? So I don't know the answer. If I had the answer, we could get up on a stage somewhere and everybody would feel better. But so it's more of me coming back into moment by moment, engagement by engagement. If it's through a flower or an insect or through talking here, or, I don't know the answers directly to that.
Yeah, well, this is what we teach, and I think being the island in the storm within our practice is most important. So zooming in a little bit to police work and first responders, how do you view the trauma that's been created by the othering on those sides of what I've heard you refer to as the thin blue line?
That's a great question. Thin blue line is certainly not a moniker or a name that I've come up with, but it's represented something within my police career, but also just my understanding of American societies anyway. But my research with police officers around the world, and also the interactions I've had with officers from other nations, is the idea of the thin blue line, that conceptually the officers are standing in the middle between right and wrong, good and bad, uh, law and order versus the chaos that comes when that goes away, that they stand in the middle. Some of what may have been developing the last couple of decades is officers have been finding themselves like they feel like they're on one side of the line or the other. The thing is they don't like to think that they're the bad guy. They like to think that they're the good guys, yet they don't feel like part of the good guys either. They feel isolated. Well, is that not some of the symptoms of feeling traumatized? When we have deep traumas, personal traumas, individual traumas, we can feel isolated and alone. And those are harsh ways to live and harsh ways to be. So oftentimes I get the sense that law enforcement in general, the large net that goes around that, are feeling like they're alone, that they're against everything else. And yet, why are they police officers? Well, most of them became police officers because they wanted to make the world a better place. And it's dangerous and scary, and when they accumulate the traumas, and they may not have been taught skills on how to navigate early on in life, how do we handle the suffering that's coming our way? Can we be loving and kind to ourselves so we can step out and go do the hard work out in public? It comes down to the absence of the ability to be self-compassionate at the individual level and also at the collective level within organizations, all the way up to beyond each entity, whether it's a city department, a county police department, a federal department. They exist to protect the world, and there's a sacrifice that comes with that, meaning that something internally is being disregarded, and self-compassion heals that disregard somehow. Mindful self-compassion courses that, many of us here are familiar with, many of us may have engaged with them, but those practices of being loving and kind inward sets the stage then, okay, well, can I keep going back outward then to engage with the harshness that humans do to each other, or just simply showing up at a natural catastrophe or a tragedy.
Is there anything else there that you're sitting with before we move on?
I sometimes get asked, many times I've been asked, and I don't want to hesitate not to name that Mike and I, we work together side by side trying to do something with moving these teachings out into departments. And from what I've really come to appreciate is that because it's so scary to turn inward, this may be reducing it too much, too reductionistic, but if many of us find it scary to turn inward and be compassionate with ourselves, it's easier to go in and do the hard thing and even risk our own well-being, that it doesn't happen. And when it doesn't happen at an organizational level, back to the systems idea, they stay present in a hurtful way, which is maladaptive. Pathology, there's some research around pathological altruism, that you keep showing up, and it doesn't have to be police officers and firefighters. It can be teachers, doctors, nurses, social workers, mindfulness teachers. It can be anybody that happens to be in the healing profession, in the caring profession, that can take themselves out over the edge with total disregard to their own well-being. It's not to suggest don't do the hard thing of helping others. It's taking care of the inner being also. And psychology starts to bring in all sorts of theories that will describe the wounded child or the various ego states, etc. But the bottom line is if we disregard the self, it'll kick back eventually, whether it's through medical ailments, cancers, heart disease, liver disease, mental unwellness, mental illness, the addictions, back to police work has an addicting quality to it. Hence, when Cassandra, the teacher named as a police officer in recovery, it's like there's an addictiveness to moving in and doing the hard thing and disregarding the inner self. All addictions are needing certain things, and a lot of what they need is self-compassion coming inside, which is maybe the hardest thing of all.
That's Cassandra Graff.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Miss Cassandra. Thank you for mentioning her.
You're welcome.
Do you have a video that would be appropriate at this moment, or coming back to Sing to the Mountain and photography?
Well, I had one in mind. I'm not going to change my mind here. Just several weeks ago, I'd been out in the park and recalling on how this photography journey started around hawks, in a family of hawks. I was already in my car driving out of the park to come home, and I encountered a hawk that was being harassed by a group of crows. So I jumped out of the car, grabbed the camera, and I filmed it.
Wow, so within the context of what we've been talking about, I feel that's very fitting. What does that video mean to you, Mark?
It's weird. Lots of emotion present right now.
I'll sit with it. That's good. Thank you for expressing it.
Mm. So what it is, initially, while I was filming it, I was rooting for the hawk. But each time I watch it, yeah, and while I was pulling it together, but even now, each time I watch it, in the context of what's going on in the world, crows are very social creatures. And I photograph them, I film them all the time while I'm out in the park. And so are hawks. They coexist together many times. Certain times of the year with whatever may be going on, they do have these kind of harsh interactions. And what we were just seeing there was a female hawk. Toward the end there, as the crows moved away, which I didn't know while I was filming it, another hawk was coming into the area. And that's what we see at the end there, the second hawk showing up, checking in with the female hawk. And I don't have a way of knowing if that's the juvenile hawk that I was watching way back last April. My understanding of hawks is that hawk will be around for a couple of years until it really learns how to do what it needs to do as a hawk. Or it could be a male hawk, because male hawks are also smaller than the female. And as I look at the interaction, I see the coming together, the connectedness between two hawks, two predators, the raptors. Now, the human side of me wants to add on some labeling like, well, maybe that's love and compassion and kindness. Some people might say, well, that's just what nature does. Yet, crows take care of themselves, hawks take care of themselves. I see other creatures all around throughout the park doing that. And I have other images of the hawks where when the fledgling was in the nest, before it had its feathers to fly, it's a hot day, mom came in, put her back to the sun, spread her wings wide out, and sat in that position and provided shade to the little one for hours. And I'm thinking, well, what parent wouldn't do that for their own kids? There's a naturalness to this connectivity, to the connectedness to the tribe, to the family, to the individuals, that I think this is part of what videos like this start to represent, is that we see a little bit of ourselves in them. Whether it's the harshness of battle or whether it's protecting our territory, our survival, I don't know what. But it's there's a blurring of lines for me the more I get into this, of what's going on.
Thank you. We're so blessed to have you part of the community here every week, and you're sharing today, sharing as you do weekly, and producing and editing. And I want to be very clear that this is all a volunteer effort on your part. That, when I make pleas for donations, somebody's watching this in the future, that goes strictly to my survival to do this, that you are volunteering all your time. So for that, I'm grateful. And I want to emphasize it. And also all the donations you've made throughout the years to get us to this point. So thank you, Mark.
Yeah, you're welcome, and I appreciate the acknowledgement. And this is part of my pathology of continuing to give. Whether it's like this, the channel, I have no expectations of making money from any of it. It's more of, let's see where it goes. Let's make the world a better place. But right now, there's not a sacrifice that I'm making to engage with everybody here on the community, anybody that's watching, is that it's deeply rooted. It needs to be coming through me, whatever that is. Yeah, it's at my nature.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I want to thank everybody who's been here on Zoom and anybody who sees this video, and you're sharing your thoughts with us. And I take back what I said earlier. I don't think this would have gone better if we had a couple of beverages while doing this. But I look forward to when we do again. So hopefully, maybe later this week, we'll see.
Cheers.
Okay, cheers. Thanks, Mark.
Bye.
Take care.
Click down below to join our Mindfulness Teacher Community Facebook group, where you're also invited to post and share. Also, subscribe to Sing to the Mountain Studio so you don't miss out on future recordings of live sessions.